Long before the rise of humanity, at the dawn of the Milky Way's history, the galaxy was home to a multitude of civilizations at varying stages of technological development. One such race was the Necrontyr. Their origins lie in a region now known in Imperial archives as the Halo Stars. The Necrontyr homeworld orbited an unstable, aggressive star. The system's heliophysical conditions were critical. The planet's surface was constantly battered by radiation storms and hard spectrum output. This ecological catastrophe predetermined the race's biology and culture. The Necrontyr life cycle was short, their physiology characterized by rapid genetic degradation and a high susceptibility to oncological diseases. The realization of inevitable, early death shaped the grim culture of the Necrontyr. Their cities were vast necropolises, where residential complexes were erected as mere temporary annexes to monumental tombs. The architecture of the living always paled in comparison to the mausoleums of the dead. In an attempt to avoid extinction, the Necrontyr directed their resources toward technological advancement. Unable to find a biological solution to withstand the radiation, they began a cosmic expansion. Using ships equipped with antimatter drives and clad in living metal, tomb fleets entered stasis to cross interstellar voids. However, the colonization of new worlds brought no cure. The genetic curse haunted the race far beyond their home system. The political structure of the Necrontyr was a confederation of independent dynasties, subject to the Triarch, a council of 3 rulers. During this period, the head of the Triarch was Szarekh, who would go down in history as the Silent King. According to protocol, the monarch did not speak directly to his subjects, broadcasting his will through the pharaons of his court. During their expansion, the Necrontyr encountered the Old Ones, a highly advanced civilization that had achieved absolute mastery over genetics and psychic energy. The Old Ones possessed exactly what the Necrontyr craved: immortality. Szarekh initiated diplomatic contact, requesting access to life extension technologies, but received a categorical refusal. This event coincided with a period of deep internal crisis known as the First Wars of Secession. The dynasties began to fight for independence from the Triarch. To prevent the collapse of the empire and consolidate society, Szarekh used the Old Ones as the image of a common enemy. War was declared, with the stated goal not only of survival, but of the annihilation of the race that had denied the Necrontyr salvation. The initial phase of the conflict ended in catastrophe. Despite mass mobilization, the technological and psychic superiority of the Old Ones led to the total defeat of the Necrontyr fleets. The race was pushed back to the fringes of the galaxy, and the Old Ones, seeing no further threat in their adversary, ceased their pursuit. The defeat triggered the Second Wars of Secession. Amidst civil war and external isolation, the Necrontyr civilization stood on the brink of extinction. The situation changed with the discovery of anomalous activity within stars. According to surviving data, whether through scientific research ordered by Szarekh or accidental discovery recorded in Eldari myth, the Necrontyr made contact with energy entities of colossal power. These beings, feeding on stellar matter, became known as the Ctan, or star gods. The first entity contacted was the one who would be named Mepethran, or the Deceiver. In their desperation and search for salvation, the Necrontyr saw in the Ctan the embodiment of the death they had worshipped for millennia. Contact with the Ctan began with a diplomatic breakthrough. The entity, subsequently known as Mepethran or the Deceiver, communicated with the Necrontyr in their own dialect. This gesture, along with the promise to serve as an intermediary between mortals and the other star gods, secured him exceptional trust from the Triarch leadership. Mepethran lacked the brute force of his brethren, but he compensated for this with strategic genius. He proposed a plan to counter the Old Ones based on asymmetric warfare. However, to fully exist in the material world, these energy entities required physical vessels. Using advanced metallurgy, the Necrontyr created shells of living metal, necrodermis. Streams of the Ctan's electromagnetic energy filled these artificial bodies, gaining form and the ability to physically interact with matter. Upon his incarnation, Mepethran appeared before Szarekh. He spoke of an ancient conflict predating to Necrontyr, in which the Ctan had been defeated by the Old Ones and forced into hiding. A strategic alliance was proposed, a unification of efforts to destroy their common enemy. In return, the Ctan offered the Necrontyr what they had sought throughout their entire history: immortality via the transfer of consciousness into bodies of necrodermis. The decision was not spontaneous. Szarekh initiated lengthy deliberations with the Triarch and the high aristocracy. The only significant voice of opposition was the court astrologer, Orichan, who predicted that gaining such power would lead to the loss of the entire race's souls. However, facing military hopelessness, Szarekh ignored the warning and ratified the treaty. A period of worship began. The Ctan, whose powers seemed divine, demanded colossal resources, consuming the life energy of slaves and the very substance of stars. In exchange, they provided technology to modernize the Necrontyr fleet and weaponry. The culmination of this alliance was Bio-transference. By Sharekh's command, the population was ordered to report to giant bio-furnaces for the conversion procedure. The process involved the total destruction of biological flesh with the simultaneous transfer of consciousness into mechanical shells. During this procedure, the Ctan, hovering above the processing complexes, feasted upon the escaping life essence of the Necrontyr, growing ever more powerful. Upon completing the transformation, Szarekh realized the catastrophic price of his bargain. He had gained immortality, absolute durability, and clarity of mind. Yet he felt an irreversible hollowness, the loss of his soul. It was a fate shared by his entire race. The distribution of the new bodies mirrored the Empire's social hierarchy. Pharaons, lords, cryptechs, and nemesors received perfect shells of necrodermis, retaining their personalities and cognitive faculties. The lower castes and common warriors were encased in primitive anthropomorphic frames. In the process of transference, their consciousness was almost entirely obliterated, leaving behind only rudimentary reflexes and combat algorithms. As a result of biotransference, the Necrontyr race ceased to exist, yielding to the Necrons. This new life form possessed absolute immunity to disease and aging. Internal conflicts and civil wars were eradicated via software. Command protocols were integrated into the consciousness of every Necron, guaranteeing unconditional loyalty to the Triarch. Szarekh assumed total control over his people, who had been transformed into a singular, perfectly coordinated mechanism. Their physiology was completely restructured. Their bodies are skeletal constructs of living metal, powered by internal energy, often emitting a green spectrum glow. The circulatory system was replaced by the circulation of coolant fluids for reactor thermoregulation. A key advantage of this new form was the reanimation protocols. The necrodermis exoskeleton is capable of self-repair even after critical damage. In the event of the host's total destruction, their engram, a digital imprint of their consciousness, and matter are teleported to the nearest tomb world for reconstruction or transfer into a new body. Armed with immortality, overwhelming firepower, and led by the insatiable Ctan, the Necrons began a full-scale campaign to purge the galaxy of biological life. Necron immortality is not absolute. Despite technological perfection, the reincarnation procedure carries cumulative risks. Each cycle of consciousness transfer or recovery from critical damage incurs microscopic errors during engram copying. After repeated destruction, a theoretical threshold of 1,000 cycles, irreversible personality degradation occurs. Higher cognitive functions fade, turning a once sentient being into a mindless automaton. In some cases, glitches resulting in total data loss during teleportation have been recorded. However, physical limitations are compensated by unique sensory systems. Necrons possess chronosense, the ability to subjectively regulate time perception, slowing it down to increase combat efficiency or accelerating it to bypass periods of waiting. The conflict shifted into a phase of total annihilation. The combined forces of the Necrons and Ctan deployed planetary-scale weaponry. Stars were snuffed out, and black holes were artificially generated.
Facing the threat of total extinction, the Old Ones mobilized their creations, including the early Eldari. It was here that the main vulnerability of the Necrons was revealed. Their technology, grounded in the laws of the material universe, proved powerless against manipulations of the warp, the immaterium. Psychic attacks by the Eldari and other allies of the Old Ones inflicted colossal damage against which the machines had no defense. In response, the Ctan initiated a project to create anti-psyker defenses. The result was the deployment of Blackstone pylons, also known as Noctilith inhibitors. The most famous complexes were located on Qiddiya. Although there is debate in xenoarchaeology regarding the authorship of these structures, the precedent of their use by the Necron Trazyn the Infinite points to their Necron origin. The function of the pylons was to create zones of calm, severing the material world from the warp, thereby stripping the servants of the Old Ones of their primary weapon. The turning point came through the intervention of the Ctan known as Nidraza Thatha, or the Burning One. He granted the Necrons the technology to breach the webway, the Old Ones' transportation network located in subspace. Dolmen gates were erected. Unlike the stable gates of the Eldari, dolmen gates operated on the principle of violently tearing reality apart. This was unstable and dangerous. Many Necron legions vanished during transit, and the gates themselves were often destroyed by the webway's defenders. However, the strategic goal was achieved. The Necrons gained access to the enemy's rear lines, neutralizing the Old Ones' mobility advantage. At a critical moment in the war, when the Old Ones' resources were depleted, a third force emerged, the Enslavers. These warp entities, drawn by the massive psychic disturbances of the war, began an invasion of reality. The Enslavers parasitized unprotected psychers, turning their biological shells into living portals. Through each such door, new specimens penetrated the material world, triggering a chain reaction. For the Old Ones, this was a catastrophe. Their own weapon, psychers, became the cause of their demise. The arrival of the Enslavers led to ecosystem collapse and forced the Old Ones to switch to a war on two fronts.
In an attempt to halt the collapse, the Old Ones accelerated their genetic engineering programs. The Krorks were created, the hypothetical ancestors of modern orcs. These beings, reaching 12 meters in height, possessed incredible physical strength and a genetic understanding of warfare technology. In orc folklore, the memory of creators named Brain Boys remains. The Knib race is also mentioned, 10-legged aggressive Xenos, remnants of which are still encountered in the galaxy. There is a theory linking the appearance of the Tyranids to the Old Ones' final experiments to create an absolute biological cleanser, though this hypothesis requires further corroboration. The absence of an off switch in such races, as in the case of the Tyranids, calls into question the foresight of the Old Ones in the final stages of the war. The Enslaver Plague shattered the infrastructure of the webway. Caught between the hammer of the Necrons and the anvil of warp entities, the civilization of the Old Ones was annihilated. Only a few managed to flee beyond the galaxy. Following the victory over their common enemy, the alliance of the Ctan and Necrons remained the sole dominant force. However, their triumph was short-lived. Deprived of a purpose, the Ctan began a struggle for power and living space. According to Harlequin legends, the deity Szarekh instigated this conflict, tricking the Ctan known as the Outsider into consuming his brethren. This marked the beginning of a civil war among the star gods, who, descending into cannibalistic madness, began to destroy one another to absorb their energy. The period following the victory over the Old Ones was characterized by extreme instability within the Ctan pantheon. The struggle for dominance led to massive devastation of the material universe. For Szarekh, the Silent King, this chaos presented a tactical window of opportunity. Waiting until the strength of his masters was depleted by internecine warfare, he initiated the rebellion he had planned since the moment he realized the price of bio-transference. The Necrons unleashed weapons of unprecedented destructive power, focusing the energy of the universe on the annihilation of the Ctan.
However, due to the fundamental nature of these entities as part of the fabric of reality, their complete destruction was impossible. Instead, a strategy of fragmentation was chosen. The energetic structure of the Ctan was shattered into thousands of shards, each imprisoned within a tesseract labyrinth, a hypercubic device serving as a projection of a pocket dimension. Necron archives have preserved data regarding the neutralization of key entities. Azagorod, the Nightbringer. To defeat the embodiment of death, the Necrons utilized light refraction technologies. Focusing the radiation of multiple stars through the so-called Eye of Ctan, they obliterated the entity's shadow shroud, rendering it vulnerable to splitting. Mephitron, the Deceiver. The entity that relied on manipulation fell victim to its own nature. Singing spheres were deployed, devices generating logical paradoxes and illusory realities. The Deceiver, unable to distinguish truth from fiction, was disoriented and fragmented. Nyadrazatha, the Burning One. The creator of the Dolmen Gates was noted for his extreme hostility toward organic life. The circumstances of his fall are documented on the bas-reliefs of the Szarekh dynasty. The imagery depicts the moment Szarekh personally pierces the entity with his spear, shattering its shell. Landugor, the Flayer. The only Ctan who was not merely shattered but completely destroyed. Before his final death, he cast a curse upon the Necron race known as the Flayer virus, a degenerative psychic disorder accompanied by a hunger for organic flesh. His demise was accompanied by a psychic impulse of unimaginable sorrow felt across the entire galaxy. Magladroth, the Void Dragon, considered the strongest of the Ctan. The talismans of Vault, Blackstone fortresses, were used in the war against him. Unconfirmed data exists, correlating with imperial myths, suggesting that a large shard of the dragon was defeated by the Emperor of Mankind during Terra's prehistoric era and imprisoned within the Noctis Labyrinth on Mars, which may have influenced the formation of the cult Mechanicus. The exception was Tsaranoga, the Outsider. Driven to madness by the consumption of other Ctan, allegedly provoked by Szarekh, he evaded capture and is presumed to be in voluntary confinement within a Dyson sphere outside the galactic plane. After the overthrow of the Ctan, the strategic position of the Necrons remained critical. The race's numbers were diminished, resources were exhausted, and the galaxy was teeming with hostile life forms, including the Enslavers and the rising Eldery. Direct confrontation threatened total annihilation.
Szarekh devised a long-term survival strategy known as the Great Sleep. The plan was based on the calculation that the Enslaver infestation would lead to the collapse of the galactic biosphere, after which the predators themselves would die of starvation. The Eldari, left without external enemies, would inevitably fall into decline. Tomb fleets were ordered to seal themselves and enter stasis for a period of 60 million years. Szarekh, his task completed, deactivated the command protocols, granting his race free will upon their awakening. He himself, tormented by guilt for the fate of his people, went into voluntary exile in the intergalactic void. Over the course of 60 million years of stasis, entropy inflicted greater damage on the Necrons than all the wars of the past. Despite the perfection of their technology, time proved merciless. 1. Tectonic activity destroyed multitudes of subterranean complexes. 2. Orbital shifts and stellar explosions annihilated entire tomb systems. 3. Failures in chronometric systems caused some worlds to awaken too early, or conversely, to remain in stasis forever. 4. The active measures of the Eldari, who destroyed sleeping worlds, also inflicted significant damage. According to modern estimates, several 100 million combat units and members of the nobility were irretrievably lost during the Great Sleep. Nevertheless, the awakening protocols were activated, and the ancient empire began its return. The engineering concept of tomb worlds was standardized during the height of the Necrontyr Empire. Each such object represents a planetary fortification designed to preserve millions of personnel and an arsenal throughout the eons. The activation process of a tomb is strictly regulated and proceeds in stages.
Primary initialization involves autonomous maintenance systems, Canoptech scarabs, and Canoptech spiders. In the next stage, standard warriors are awakened to secure the safety perimeter. Information gathered by scout machines is transmitted to the central processor of the Necron Lord, who emerges from stasis last, possessing a complete tactical understanding of the situation. During hibernation, the functioning of the tomb complexes is maintained by billions of constructs. Canoptech scarabs, autonomous units of living metal governed by a central program, perform continuous repairs on infrastructure and recycle perimeter intruders. A particular threat is posed by Canoptech wraiths. These units are equipped with phase generators, allowing them to temporarily shift into an immaterial state to evade damage. This technology is also utilized for offensive purposes. The materialization of a construct inside a biological entity results in a fatal displacement of internal organs. In instances where a tomb world is found to be inhabited by lesser civilizations, sterilization protocols are activated. Defense systems shift into harvest mode, the objective of which is the total annihilation of biological life within effective range. The chronology of the awakening is asynchronous. Some worlds activated during the Great Crusade, others during the Indomitus era, while many remain in dormant mode. Prolonged stasis, spanning over 60 million years, has led to critical failures in memory banks. Certain tomb worlds have suffered irreversible engram degradation. Their populations awoke devoid of personality and higher cognitive functions. To avoid internal chaos, governance of such planets, classified as severed worlds, is assumed by an automated program known as the Tomb Mind. Other dynasties isolate such sectors, fearing a repetition of this fate. The Necrontyr Empire has retained a feudal hierarchy of worlds. 1. Crown worlds, administrative centers, seats of the high aristocracy, and pharaons. These possess the maximum level of defense. 2. Core worlds, the heartlands of specific dynasties. 3. Fringe worlds, peripheral colonies possessing strategic but not political significance. Upon awakening, in the absence of Szarech's global command protocols, the dynasties reverted to the fractured model characteristic of the era prior to Bio-transference. Territorial conflicts, diplomatic intrigues, and local resource wars have been observed. The situation altered with the return of Szarekh, the Silent King, from intergalactic exile. According to lore archives, his voluntary alienation lasted 60 million years. The catalyst for his return was the detection of a new threat beyond the galaxy, the Tyranid hive fleets. Realizing that the galaxy's biomass faces total consumption, rendering reverse biotransference, the return of Necrons to organic bodies, impossible, Szarekh initiated a campaign to unite the scattered dynasties.
Szarekh operates through the Triarch Praetorians, elite units that have maintained loyalty to the ancient codes. Initially acting covertly and manipulating lesser races, including temporary tactical alliances, such as with the Blood Angels chapter, the Silent King eventually revealed his presence. A key event was Szarech's arrival at the Untrock tomb world, where he accepted an oath of fealty from the new Triarch. From this moment, a mass consolidation of forces began. Hundreds of dynasties are confirming their loyalty to the king, projecting their holograms onto Szarech's flagship from all corners of the galaxy. The goal of the campaign is the restoration of a unified empire to withstand the Tyranid threat. The first documented contact between the Imperium and the awakened Necrons, classified by the Ordo Xenos as the Sanctuary 101 massacre, occurred during a clash between the Szarekh dynasty and a garrison of the Adepta Sororitas. Despite fierce resistance, the entire personnel of the convent were liquidated. Analysis of fragmented video logs allowed the Inquisition to identify the attackers as a priority Xenos threat. Currently, Necron activity is recorded universally. Of particular concern is the incident involving the breach of the Sol system by 5 Necron light cruisers. The Xenos landing party made planetfall on Mars in the region of the Noctis Labyrinth. The operation's objective was presumably to verify the integrity of the prison of the Ctan known as the Void Dragon.
confirming the Necrons' enduring interest in ancient entities even in the 41st millennium. The incident at the Noctis Labyrinth on Mars remains one of the Imperium's most guarded secrets. It is hypothesized that the goal of the Necron infiltration was to contact or liberate the entity imprisoned within the depths of the Red Planet. A theory exists, correlating with the secret doctrines of the Mechanicus, that it is here that the largest shard of the Ctan, Magladroth the Void Dragon, rests. Operational data indicates that the Xenos were destroyed by Inquisition forces. However, the very fact that the Sol system could be penetrated threatens the security of Terra. Capturing samples of Necron technology, or living specimens, if such a term is applicable, is practically impossible for the Inquisition. Upon sustaining critical damage, phase-out protocols are triggered, and the subject is teleported to a tomb. Deserving of separate attention is the theory regarding the origin of the Pariah gene, a genetic anomaly whose carriers, known as blanks, cast no reflection in the warp. A number of Imperial xenobiologists advance the version that this genotype is the result of ancient Necron experiments on humanity's ancestors, aimed at creating the perfect weapon against psychers. At present, the mass deployment of pariahs in Necron armies is not recorded, which may indicate a freeze or a re-evaluation of the project's effectiveness. The technological gap between the Necrons and younger races, including the Tau and Eldari, is estimated as absolute. Their arsenal includes the controlled destabilization of atomic bonds, manipulation of time loops, and nanotechnology of the highest order. The primary infantry weapon is the Gauss flare. Imperial nomenclature is flawed. The term Gauss refers to the magnetic accelerators of ancient Terra, whereas Necron weaponry operates on the principle of molecular disintegration. The beam destroys the bonds between the target's atoms, stripping away matter layer by layer, and pulling it toward the source of the emission. Tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus who have studied captured specimens have concluded that generating such energy within such dimensions is mathematically impossible according to the laws of imperial physics. In close quarters, hyperphase blades and war scythes are employed. Their energy fields effortlessly bypass Terminator armor and the power fields of the Astartes. All Necron constructs, from infantry to fleet vessels, are composed of living metal, necrodermis. This material is maintained by swarms of canoptech scarabs and nanocytes, ensuring real-time regeneration of damage. Necron gravitational technology also surpasses Eldari equivalents, applied universally, from the microthrusters of drones to the propulsion systems of heavy vehicles. In planetary engagements, monoliths and pylons play a key role. Pylons, autonomous defensive complexes equipped with an energy matrix. They are capable of firing particle whips or focused Gauss beams at extreme ranges, striking both ground and orbital targets. Monoliths, classified as heavy assault platforms and mobile teleportation nodes. At the center of the construct lies the Eternity Gate, a stable space-time wormhole. This device allows for the instant deployment of reinforcements from stasis tombs directly onto the battlefield, while simultaneously accelerating the repair protocols of allied units.
The Necron space fleet does not utilize warp drives, thereby eliminating the risk of demonic incursion. Instead, they employ inertialess drives, allowing them to achieve faster-than-light speeds in real space, or dolmen gates to breach the webway. The pinnacle of technological might is considered to be the Celestial Orrery, located on the tomb world of Thanatos under the control of the Oriscar dynasty. The facility is a precise real-time holographic model of the galaxy. Each point of light is quantum entangled with a real star. Snuffing out a light on the model results in the physical transformation of the corresponding star into a supernova. Potentially, the orrery allows for the destruction of any system in the galaxy. However, its use is strictly regulated. Disrupting the balance of stellar mass threatens to destabilize the gravitational bonds of the entire Milky Way. The Oriscar dynasty acts not as conquerors, but as guardians, activating the weapon only in exceptional circumstances.
The entities that once ruled the Necrons are now reduced to the status of weapons and power sources. Ctan shards, despite their fragmentation, retain the ability to warp reality, but are stripped of the memory of their complete form. To contain these entities, tesseract labyrinths are used, compact hypercubic traps designed, according to archives, by the cryptax Szarekh or Szeras, depending on the glyph interpretation. If sensors detect an attempt by a shard to break free or restore its personality, security protocols instantly drag it back into the pocket dimension. The Necrons pragmatically utilize the infinite energy of the Ctan to power their machines, yet treat their prisoners with extreme caution, mindful of the threat of the star gods reuniting. The abilities of Ctan shards vary from manipulating temporal streams to direct transmutation of matter, turning biological objects into liquid or banishing them to alternate dimensions. Destroying the physical shell of a shard is a task of critical difficulty. Breaching the integrity of the necrodermis leads to a catastrophic release of energy and the subsequent discorporation of the entity.
Not all shards are under Necron control. Some exist autonomously, as confirmed by Eldari reports. A special place in the arsenal is held by Ctan phase weapons. Their blades flicker between dimensions, ignoring all forms of armor and force fields. There is a known precedent of an assassination attempt by a Calidus assassin of the Officio Assassinorum on a planetary governor who turned out to be a disguised shard of the Deceiver. Instead of inflicting damage, the phase blade was absorbed into the target's body, indicating the Ctan's immunity to technologies based on their own nature. Similar weaponry, known as xenophase blades, is utilized by the Death Watch, despite the strictest bans of the Ordo Xenos. For faster-than-light navigation and communication without the use of the warp, the Necrons employed the Pharos system. Its operating principle is based on quantum empathic resonance. Unlike the psychic astronomicon, the Pharos operates on concepts of will and quantum entanglement, creating an instant route between the starting point and the destination. The Pharos is not a singular object, but a distributed network of navigational stations. The structure is constructed from blackstone, noctilith, and powered by multiple Ctan shards. Specifically, the entity Zarhulash is mentioned, who retained his personality and hatred for the Emperor, whom he refers to as the weapon of the Old Ones. During the era of the Horus Heresy, the beacon on the planet Sotha allowed the Ultramarines' fleets to navigate the ruin storm. However, by the 41st millennium, the majority of the network has been destroyed. Only one functional, until recently, complex on Sotha is known. A unique feature of the Pharos is its ability to interact with spiritual emanations, inducing the visualization of memories and providing data on other Blackstone objects. In the Ultima Segmentum, Attila system, lies an anomalous object, the Monolith of Ing. It is under the control of the Szarekh dynasty, but a webway portal bearing the rune of Ulthwé has been detected nearby. Imperial archives indicate interest in the object from one of the lost Primarchs during the Great Crusade, though the data remains classified. The monolith's activity resumed following the opening of the Great Rift. Upon the approach of the warp storm Cerberax, the object generated an anti-empiric field that effectively blocked the demonic incursion. Observations by the Adeptus Mechanicus during the so-called Cerberax Wars recorded an inexplicable phenomenon. Upon contact with the monolith's field, Necron vessels were not destroyed, but duplicated. The nature of this replication remains unknown and is classified as techno-heresy of the highest order. Following the deactivation of Zarekh's command protocols, the structure of Necron society reverted to feudal fragmentation. The hierarchy is vertical. Pharaon, head of the dynasty. Overlords, rulers of clusters. Lords, rulers of specific tombs. Dynastic goals vary from strict isolationism to attempts to reverse bio-transference. The dominant force at present is the Szarekh dynasty. It emerged from the Great Sleep with minimal damage to its engrams and infrastructure. The dynasty's holdings number over 80 tomb worlds, including the crown world of Mandragora. Upon awakening, the dynasty faced a succession crisis. The sitting pharaoh had descended into madness. As a result of the ensuing civil war, power was seized by Nemesor Imhotep, Imhotep the Stormlord. Lacking the protocol-sanctioned right to the title of pharaoh, as the previous ruler still lived, he de facto usurped control, establishing a regime of military dictatorship. It was the aggressive expansion of the Szarekh that formed the Imperium's initial perception of the Necrons as a singular, monolithic threat. Prior to the return of the Silent King, the Szarekh dynasty remained the preeminent power. Their political doctrine is based on rigid expansion and assimilation. Toward other dynasties and even certain lesser races, a code of honor is applied. The adversary is offered vassalage. In the event of refusal and subsequent military defeat, the population is subjected to total annihilation or enslavement, and resources are annexed. Critical engram failures have been recorded within Szarekh structures. An example is the formation of separatist enclaves, referred to in data logs as the Karnoks. These formations, realizing their nature as digital ghosts in metal bodies, initiated campaigns to destroy other Necrons, interpreting death as liberation from the curse of bio-transference. Contrary to the expectations of many overlords, primacy did not belong to the Szarekh dynasty at the onset of the awakening. This is explained by a strategic decision of the Silent King. Upon entering voluntary exile, he took his dynasty's elite legions with him. The Szarekh tomb worlds remaining in the galaxy, deprived of their main fleet, were subjected to systematic attacks by the Eldari and hostile dynasties seeking vengeance for the consequences of bio-transference. Many systems were destroyed by warp storms. The situation changed radically in the 41st millennium with the open return of the Silent King. The key advantage of the Szarekh is their technological superiority in manipulating Blackstone, Noctilith. Their cryptechs are considered unrivaled masters in creating anti-warp fields. Even standard infantry are equipped with defensive matrices that nullify psychic attacks.
A phenomenon of note is the mnemonic blockade. The memory banks of most Necrons lack clear data regarding the Szarekh dynasty. Even chronomancers of the caliber of Oricon the Diviner experience difficulty when attempting to focus on the history of the ruling house, indicating intentional interference with the cognitive protocols of the entire race. Based in the Segmentum Ultima, centered on the Dal V system, lies the Novak dynasty. Their tactical doctrine was formed during the time of flesh and is characterized by irrational brutality. The tradition of bathing their armor in the blood of enemies survived bio-transference. Novak visual sensors are programmed to stimulate combat algorithms upon contact with biological fluids, driving their troops into a state of controlled frenzy. Following the opening of the Great Rift, the dynasty has engaged in active hostilities against the Imperium, Orcs, and the forces of chaos. In clashes with the Death Guard, Novak worlds were attacked by a biomechanical virus, the so-called ferric blight, engineered by the Daemon Primarch Mortarion. The epidemic inflicted significant damage, necessitating the mass replacement of physical vessels. The dynasty is led by Pharaoh Galmak, known as the Moon Killer. The title stems from his use of gravitational weaponry to destroy planetary satellites in order to destabilize tidal forces. Also in the service of the dynasty is a Ctan known as the Crimson God, presumably a shard of Landugor, fully subjugated to the will of the Red King. The Nihilak dynasty, based on the crown world of Geddon under the rule of Pharaoh Crispek, long adhered to a policy of strict isolationism. Their priority is the preservation and accumulation of artifacts from extinct civilizations. The dynasty's resources are estimated to be colossal, allowing them to maintain formidable defensive fleets. Nihilak's primary strategic asset is the head of the Yitzhon prophet, the last representative of an extinct psychic race. The Necrons integrated the organic remains with a neurographic resonator, allowing for the visualization of probabilistic timelines. This provides the Nihilak fleet with tactical prescience. Despite attempts by the biological object to resist by obscuring projections, the device functions effectively. Currently, the dynasty has emerged from isolation, swearing fealty to Szarekh. The crown world of Ariand, located in close proximity to the galactic core, serves as the capital of the Nephric dynasty. Its nearness to supermassive stars provides them with unlimited energy resources.
The philosophy of the Nephric differs radically from the norm. Rather than returning to biological bodies, they strive for transformation into beings of pure light energy. Pharaon Silphek initiated a procedure to coat the carapaces of his elite in metagold, a rare alloy developed by local cryptechs. This plating allows troops to perform phase shifts and short-range teleportation known as the Golden Shift. This technology has garnered the attention of hostile factions. Notably, the Daemon Primarch Magnus the Red has shown interest in the methods of Ctan containment employed by this dynasty. Historically, the Mephrit dynasty served as the punitive instrument of the Silent King. Whenever a rebellious world needed to be brought to heel, Szarekh sanctioned the intervention of this very dynasty. Their methods of warfare, devoid of traditional codes of honor, drew condemnation from other Necron aristocracy. Yet the effectiveness of the Mephrit was never in question. In the current era, the dynasty's holdings are localized in the Ultima Segmentum, including the tomb worlds of Perdita and Kyrakos. The Great Sleep inflicted critical damage on the Mephrit command structure. Their Pharaon, Szarekh, was assassinated by an Eldari agent while in stasis. The resulting power vacuum led to internal confrontation. Key figures in the struggle for the throne are Zarathustra the Ineffable, overlord of Perdita, and Magnanolim, keeper of the solar lattice. Despite retaining military potential, Zarathustra emerged from stasis with a hypertrophied lust for domination. Infrastructure of many Mephrit systems was destroyed or occupied by lesser races. A number of overlords, succumbing to mental degradation, the so-called destroyer madness, initiated self-destruct protocols, incinerating their own planets in stellar fire. To outside observers, these events appeared as natural astronomical cataclysms. However, some worlds survived thanks to radical precautions. Overlord Simnafat, for example, preemptively destroyed all stars within a 10-light-year radius, creating a void zone, and deployed gravitational traps and null fields to annihilate any ships on approach. In the 41st millennium, the Mephrit actively employ stellar engineering technologies as weapons, snuffing out suns in systems occupied by humans, Eldari, or Tyranids, striving to reclaim their lost grandeur. The Maynarch dynasty occupies a special place in the hierarchy of threats. Known for their irrational brutality, during the War in Heaven, they were used by Szarekh as shock troops, analogous to the World Eater's Legion in Imperial terminology. It is the Maynarch who are credited with the destruction of the Ctan Landugor the Flare. Before its final discorporation, the entity cast a biodigital curse upon its killers. This event marked the origin of the Flayed Ones, Necrons subjected to a degenerative mutation. Their cognitive processes are looped on hunger and the compulsion to drape themselves in organic skin. The infection is considered viral, thus infected units are banished to the Ghostwind dimension, or drawn to the so-called Bone Kingdom of Drazak by a psychic resonance of decay.
Flayed ones are capable of tearing through the fabric of reality for sudden attacks, after which they fall back into lethargy. Despite the risk, Szarekh maintained the Maynarch as a strategic reserve, stationing them on the galactic frontier. The dynasty's awakening proceeded with minimal personnel losses. The current ruler, Pharaon Shunbakir, the Mother of Oblivion, adheres to a doctrine of total genocide, viewing the complete annihilation of biological life as the sole purpose of existence.
The Nexus dynasty. The history of this faction is marked by conflict with the Triarch. After Szarekh refused to provide reinforcements for the defense of the crown world Mobius against an orc invasion, the Nexus revised their ethical protocols. Surviving at the cost of colossal losses, they abandoned concepts of honor and justice. Their modern doctrine is based on pragmatism, treachery, and the use of any methods of warfare, however dishonorable. The Subakar dynasty. An example of a catastrophic stasis system failure. Pharaon Amenhotep awoke with irreversible psychic damage and destroyed the control programs of his crown world, reducing his warriors to the state of mindless automatons. De facto leadership was assumed by Regent Ahotep. Supported by the cryptech Ozkan the Codifier, he is manually awakening the legions and monitoring the Hades anomaly, showing interest in human activity within the sector. The Thocht dynasty. A unique phenomenon of the Thocht dynasty is the retention of personality and cognitive functions even among the rank-and-file warriors, distinguishing them from the standard engrammatic templates of other dynasties. This quality has made them the core of the Silent King's new army. The crown world of Megastata is characterized by resource wealth and high fleet activity. A technical feature of the dynasty is the use of radiation weaponry. Their Gauss emitters are modified to generate hard ionizing radiation, emitting an azure spectrum glow. The tomb world of Zentragora serves as the primary hub for research into reverse bio-transference. It is here that Illuminor Szeras is based, the cryptech who, during the Necrontyr era, designed and oversaw the process of transferring consciousness into metal bodies. Szeras's current activity focuses on finding a way to reverse the process or perfect it, by comprehending the nature of the soul and biological life. The fleets of Zentragora conduct regular raids across the galaxy to harvest biological material. Thousands of living beings from various species are delivered to the laboratories of Szeras for vivisection. These procedures are performed without anesthesia. The cryptech intentionally deactivates his audio receptors so that the vocalizations of the test subjects do not distract him from the molecular analysis of tissues. The goal of this research is the isolation of the essence of life. Yet, after millions of years, the desired result has yet to be achieved. The tomb world of Solemnak represents a unique artificial construct, a Dyson sphere, the outer shell of which is composed of nanomachines. A system of mirrors and energy lenses generate an artificial atmosphere and lighting. The planet is the personal domain of Trazyn the Infinite, Nihilak dynasty, known as the Archivist. The functional purpose of Solemnak is that of a museum and artifact repository. The collection includes technological relics, historical scenes captured within stasis fields, the so-called prismatic galleries, and living exhibits. Among the displays are entire regiments of the Imperial Guard, including historical figures of the caliber of Lord Solar Macarius, as well as fragments of key events such as the fall of Cadia. Security for the complex is provided by elite Leichguard and the cryptech curator Solemnak. Trazyn continues the active expansion of his collection, stopping at nothing, even seizing objects from the worlds of other dynasties. Prolonged stasis has led to the emergence of anomalous zones within the Necron Empire. The Necron Emperor. The tomb world of Sarkhan was subjected to radiation storms that destroyed the memory engrams of the local population, reducing the Necrons to the state of primitive automatons. The vacuum of command was filled by the tomb's central control program.
Gaining a peculiar form of self-awareness, the AI assumed the title of the Necron Emperor. This entity is waging an aggressive campaign to conquer neighboring systems. Its first victim was the world of Szarekh. Its population was subjugated using mind-shackle scarabs. By the end of the 41st millennium, 3 tomb worlds are under the control of this outcast. This sets a precedent for the emergence of abominable intelligence within Necron society. The Ctan docks. During the era of the War in Heaven, Ctan served as a logistical hub for sublight colonization ships. Due to damage to the main program during the Great Sleep, the docks never received the signal regarding the war's end. The automation continues to function in emergency mode. Every 33 weeks, a ship fully crewed by legions of immortals is launched into space. The course is plotted randomly, into stars, black holes, or territories controlled by chaos and tyrannids. Resources are wasted in automatic mode. Immortals, the elite of the regular forces. Unlike warriors, whose consciousness is practically erased, immortals retain rudimentary cognitive functions and tactical thinking. Their loyalty is ensured by rigid command protocols. Their primary motivation is the execution of combat algorithms and the assertion of Necron dominance. Specialized units include Death Marks, snipers utilizing pocket dimensions, and Flayed Ones, victims of Lundugor's virus. The Destroyer Cult, a special caste representing a systemic error in the Necron psyche. Destroyers are former immortals or lords whose engrams have been overwritten by an obsessive idea of total genocide. They make no distinction between combatants and civilians. Their goal is the annihilation of all organic life. To increase killing efficiency, destroyers subject their bodies to radical cybernetic modification. Lower limbs are replaced with anti-gravity platforms, and upper limbs with heavy weaponry, Gauss cannons, phase blades. In Necron society, they are considered dangerous madmen, yet they are utilized as a shock force. Destroyers operate in autonomous groups on the periphery, submitting to high command only temporarily and only for the opportunity to continue the harvest. In Necron military doctrine, specialized castes and modifications hold a distinct place. The Destroyer Cult represents a radical deviation from standard engrams. These units optimize their physical shells exclusively for the destruction of biological life. Locust Heavy Destroyers, equipped with reinforced reactors to power heavy Gauss cannons or enmitic exterminators. Their firepower is capable of penetrating the armor of heavy vehicles. Skorpek/Destroyer Lords, cult commanders who have retained a high level of intellect directed toward the tactics of genocide. They prefer close-quarters combat, utilizing war scythes and hyperphase blades. Responsibility for the army's technical state and the development of new weaponry lies with the caste of Crypteks. Unlike the religious worship of technology in the Imperium, Crypteks employ a scientific approach to manipulating the fundamental forces of the universe: singularity, temporal flows, and the transmutation of matter. The internal structure of the caste is divided into conclaves by specialization: chronomancers, manipulation of entropy and time; plasmamancers, control over stellar energy and plasma; psychomancers, influence over neurochemistry and fear. The political weight of the Crypteks is immense. Dynastic overlords are forced to maintain symbiotic relationships with them, providing rare resources, precious metals, and energy in exchange for the maintenance of tomb systems. In effect, the influence of high-ranking Crypteks is often comparable to the power of lords. The enforcement of ancient codes and the security of the ruling elite are the responsibility of the Triarch Praetorians. This organization stands outside the dynastic hierarchy, answering exclusively to the Council of the Triarch. They possess judicial powers, up to and including the execution of nobility who violate the codes of honor. The Praetorians did not enter the Great Sleep.
For 60 million years, they patrolled the galaxy, guarding slumbering tomb worlds from marauders and degradation. Their war gear includes anti-gravity modules and rods of covenant, weapons that combine the power of a high-energy discharge with a symbol of authority. The personal guard of the overlords is represented by the Lich Guard. These are elite warriors whose loyalty protocols do not allow for betrayal. Their armament varies from war scythes to hyperphase swords, paired with dispersion shields, capable of absorbing plasma and kinetic impacts of colossal magnitude. Necron experimental programs include the utilization of the Pariah gene, a rare mutation within the human race, carriers of which cast no reflection in the warp, psychic blanks. The project envisioned the creation of cybernetic hybrids capable of inducing disorientation and physical pain in psychers, particularly the Eldar, the Necrons' primary historical adversary. However, the principal weapon of terror remains the Ctan shards. These are the fragmented entities of the star gods, imprisoned within tesseract labyrinths. The Necrons utilize them as batteries and weapons of mass destruction. 1. Transcendent shards, the result of fusing anywhere from a dozen to 100 shards into a single entity. They possess power capable of altering reality on a planetary scale. 2. Tesseract vaults, gigatonic prison engines that hold transcendent shards, siphoning their energy to power their systems and weaponry. Any attempt at insubordination by the entity is punished by the immediate activation of pain protocols and re-imprisonment measures. On the battlefields, infantry support is provided by Triarch Stalkers, walkers equipped with quantum force fields. Their design allows for effective maneuvering across complex terrain while destroying enemy armor. The Silent King himself, Szarekh, utilizes a unique command platform, the Dace of Dominion. The construct is propelled and powered by the Ctan shard of Nidrazatha, the Burning One, imprisoned within it. This Ctan, who once taught the Necrons how to create the Dolmen Gates, was personally defeated by Szarekh. Now, his energy powers not only the transport, but also the Scepter of Eternal Glory, the King's personal weapon. As of the close of the 41st millennium, approximately 744.M41 and onward, the Necron Empire is in the initial phase of mass awakening. Billions of units still remain in stasis, yet the process is accelerating exponentially. The Praetorians did not enter the Great Sleep. For 60 million years, they patrolled the galaxy, guarding slumbering tomb worlds from marauders and degradation. Their war gear includes anti-gravity modules and rods of covenant, weapons that combine the power of a high-energy discharge with a symbol of authority. The personal guard of the overlords is represented by the Lich Guard. These are elite warriors whose loyalty protocols do not allow for betrayal. Their armament varies from war scythes to hyperphase swords, paired with dispersion shields, capable of absorbing plasma and kinetic impacts of colossal magnitude. Necron experimental programs include the utilization of the Pariah gene, a rare mutation within the human race, carriers of which cast no reflection in the warp, psychic blanks. The project envisioned the creation of cybernetic hybrids capable of inducing disorientation and physical pain in psychers, particularly the Eldar, the Necrons' primary historical adversary. However, the principal weapon of terror remains the Ctan shards. These are the fragmented entities of the star gods, imprisoned within tesseract labyrinths. The Necrons utilize them as batteries and weapons of mass destruction. 1. Transcendent shards, the result of fusing anywhere from a dozen to 100 shards into a single entity.
They possess power capable of altering reality on a planetary scale. 2. Tesseract vaults. Gigatonic prison engines that hold transcendent shards, siphoning their energy to power their systems and weaponry. Any attempt at insubordination by the entity is punished by the immediate activation of pain protocols and re-imprisonment measures. On the battlefields, infantry support is provided by Triarch Stalkers, walkers equipped with quantum force fields. Their design allows for effective maneuvering across complex terrain while destroying enemy armor. The Silent King himself, Szarekh, utilizes a unique command platform, the Dace of Dominion. The construct is propelled and powered by the Ctan shard of Nidrazatha, the Burning One, imprisoned within it. This Ctan, who once taught the Necrons how to create the Dolmen Gates, was personally defeated by Szarekh. Now, his energy powers not only the transport, but also the Scepter of Eternal Glory, the King's personal weapon. As of the close of the 41st millennium, approximately 744.M41 and onward, the Necron Empire is in the initial phase of mass awakening. Billions of units still remain in stasis, yet the process is accelerating exponentially.
Sarekh's return from the intergalactic void marked a paradigm shift. Dynasties are moving from scattered skirmishes to consolidation. The primary catalyst for unification became the threat of the Tyrannid hive fleets, whose biological mass poses an existential threat to the plans for reverse bio-transference. Szarekh and his Praetorians are actively inspecting tomb worlds, coercing dynasties into obedience for the survival of the race. The return of the Silent King to galactic politics was not spontaneous. For a long period, Szarekh operated covertly, analyzing the risks of internal destabilization and assessing the loyalty of the dynasties after millions of years of absence. His open appearance was synchronized with global shifts in the structure of the galaxy. During the opening of the Great Rift, Cicatrax Maledictum, the Necrons initiated a massive engineering project classified by the Imperium as the Pariah Nexus. This is a vast region of space artificially isolated from the influence of the warp. The name was assigned by the Imperium due to the similarity of the psychic suppression effect to that of the Pariah gene. Construction of the complex was conducted in the Nephilim sector under the direct supervision of Illuminor Szeras and with the resource support of the Szarekh dynasty. The primary construction material was noctilith, blackstone, mined and processed on an industrial scale. The epicenter of the anomaly is located in the Sendu star system. There lies the key infrastructure object, the noctilith cage. A network of cyclopean pylons has been erected around it, positioned according to principles of non-Euclidean fractal cryptology. The geometry of the structure is calculated to create a self-sustaining field of a counter-empiric matrix, also known as the stilling. The influence of the Nexus extends across interstellar distances, causing living beings with a connection to the warp to suffer symptoms of deep lethargy, despair, and ultimately the snuffing out of the soul. Tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus who attempted to analyze it proved incapable of decoding the working principles of this technology. Realizing the threat of losing the sector, the leadership of the Indomitus Crusade sanctioned the deployment of Battle Group Kalidas into the anomaly zone. The conflict in the Nephilim sector escalated into a protracted war of attrition. Imperial forces faced not only the resistance of Necron legions, but also the crushing influence of the Nexus itself, which blocked astropathic communication and navigation, as well as eroding the morale of personnel. The incident in the Pariah Nexus served as the prelude to the official announcement of Szarekh's return and the beginning of the consolidation of the Necron Empire. This material serves as a brief overview of the current geopolitical status of the Necron race.
The history of the ancient empire's awakening continues to unfold, and many aspects of their technology and strategic plans remain subjects for further study and analysis.